Hey everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today's video is going to be all about comparing Melbourne and Sydney, two of the most popular cities in Australia, and figuring out which one is the most livable. As you may know, both cities have their own unique qualities, attractions, and challenges. Melbourne is known for its arts and culture scene, while Sydney is famous for its beaches and landmarks like the Opera House and Harbour Bridge. But when it comes to deciding where to live, there are many factors to consider, such as the cost of living, transportation, housing, education, employment opportunities, and more. That's why this topic is so important, especially for those who are planning to move to Australia or are simply curious about the lifestyle in these cities. By the end of this video, I hope to provide you with a comprehensive comparison of Melbourne and Sydney, and help you decide which one suits your preferences and needs better. So let's get started. Before we dive into the details of comparing Melbourne and Sydney, let's start with some background information on these two cities. Melbourne is the capital city of the state of Victoria and the second most populous city in Australia, with a population of over 5 million people. It's located in the southeastern part of the country and has a temperate oceanic climate, which means that it can experience 4 seasons in one day. Melbourne is known for its vibrant arts and culture scene, its love for coffee and food, and its many festivals and events, such as the Melbourne International Comedy Festival and the Australian Open Tennis Tournament. Sydney, on the other hand, is the capital city of the state of New South Wales and the largest city in Australia, with a population of over 5.5 million people. It's located in the southeastern part of the country as well, but it has a humid subtropical climate, which means that it's generally warmer and more humid than Melbourne. Sydney is known for its stunning beaches, such as Bondi and Manly, its iconic landmarks like the Opera House and Harbour Bridge, and its diverse multicultural population. It's also the economic and financial hub of Australia, with a bustling business district and many job opportunities. So as you can see, both Melbourne and Sydney have their own unique qualities and characteristics. Now let's compare them in terms of livability. Let's start with the climate and weather conditions of Melbourne and Sydney. Melbourne has a temperate oceanic climate, which means that it experiences 4 seasons in one day, as I mentioned earlier. The summers are generally warm but not too hot, with average temperatures ranging from 14 to 25 degrees Celsius. The winters can be quite chilly and wet, with temperatures ranging from 6 to 14 degrees Celsius. Melbourne also has a reputation for being quite unpredictable weather-wise, with sudden changes in temperature, rain, and wind. Sydney, on the other hand, has a humid subtropical climate, which means that it's generally warmer and more humid than Melbourne. The summers can be quite hot and humid, with average temperatures ranging from 18 to 26 degrees Celsius. The winters are milder and drier than Melbourne, with temperatures ranging from 9 to 17 degrees Celsius. Sydney is also known for its occasional heat waves and thunderstorms, especially during the summer months. When it comes to which city has the better climate and weather conditions, it really depends on your personal preference. If you enjoy the 4 seasons and don't mind some unpredictable weather, then Melbourne might be the better choice for you. But if you prefer warmer and more consistent weather, then Sydney might be the way to go. Of course, both cities have their own unique beauty and charm, regardless of the weather. The climate and weather conditions can have a significant impact on the livability of each city. In Melbourne, the unpredictable weather and temperature changes can make it challenging to plan outdoor activities or events. You might have to carry an umbrella, a jacket, and sunscreen all at once. This can also affect your mood and mental health, especially if you're not used to such changes. On the other hand, Melbourne's cooler weather can be a relief for those who don't enjoy hot and humid climates, and the city does have many indoor attractions, such as museums and galleries. In Sydney, the warmer and more consistent weather can make it easier to plan outdoor activities, such as picnics, beach days, or hiking. However, the humidity and occasional heat waves can also be a challenge, especially if you're not used to it. Sydney also has a higher risk of bushfires during the summer months, which can affect air quality and safety. On the positive side, Sydney's beaches and coastal lifestyle can be a big draw for those who love water activities and a relaxed vibe. Overall, the climate and weather conditions are just one aspect to consider when comparing the livability of Melbourne and Sydney. It's important to weigh the pros and cons based on your own preferences and needs, as both cities have their own unique strengths and challenges. Now let's talk about the cost of living in Melbourne and Sydney. Generally speaking, both cities are considered to be expensive by Australian standards, but Sydney tends to be more expensive overall. In terms of housing, the median house price in Melbourne is around $900,000, while in Sydney it's around $1.3 million. This means that buying a house or even renting an apartment can be more affordable in Melbourne than in Sydney. However, keep in mind that the cost of housing can vary widely depending on the location and the size of the property. When it comes to other expenses such as food, transportation, and entertainment, both cities are fairly similar. You can expect to pay around $5 for a cup of coffee, $15 to $20 for a meal in a casual restaurant, and around $100 for a monthly transportation pass. Both cities also have plenty of free or low-cost entertainment options, such as parks, museums, and festivals. However, if you prefer more upscale or exclusive entertainment options, such as fine dining or luxury shopping, you might find that Sydney is more expensive than Melbourne. Overall, while Melbourne is generally considered to be more affordable than Sydney when it comes to housing, the cost of living in both cities can still be quite high. It's important to factor in your income and budget when considering which city is more livable for you. Let's now compare the transportation systems of Melbourne and Sydney. Both cities have extensive public transportation networks, but there are some differences to consider. Melbourne's transportation system includes buses, trams, and trains, which are operated by multiple companies. The system is generally considered to be reliable and efficient, with frequent services and a relatively affordable fare structure. Trams are particularly iconic in Melbourne, with the largest tram network in the world. One downside, however, is that Melbourne's public transportation system can get crowded during peak hours, especially on certain train lines and tram routes. Sydney's transportation system includes buses, trains, ferries, and light rail, which are operated by different government agencies. The system is generally considered to be modern and well-maintained, with newer trains and buses than Melbourne. However, the fares can be more expensive, especially if you need to travel across different zones or use multiple modes of transportation. One advantage of Sydney's transportation system is the scenic views that you can enjoy while using the ferries to commute or explore the city. Another important factor to consider is the accessibility of public transportation. Both cities have wheelchair-accessible options, but Melbourne has been criticized for having some tram stops that are difficult to access for people with disabilities. In comparison, Sydney has made more efforts to improve accessibility, with more accessible trains and buses. Both cities have different fare structures and pricing. Melbourne has a zone-based system, where the fare depends on how far you travel and which zones you cross. The fare can range from around $4 for a short tram or bus ride to $10 or more for a longer train journey. In comparison, Sydney has a distance-based system, where the fare depends on the distance you travel and the mode of transportation. The fare can range from around $3 for a short bus or train ride to $10 or more for a ferry ride. Overall, the availability and affordability of public transportation in Melbourne and Sydney can vary depending on where you live and work, as well as your personal transportation needs. It's important to research and compare the public transportation options in both cities when deciding which one is more livable for you. Another important factor to consider when comparing the livability of Melbourne and Sydney is the housing market. Let's take a look at some of the key differences between the two cities. Both Melbourne and Sydney have experienced significant growth in their housing markets in recent years, with prices rising rapidly. However, Sydney has traditionally been considered more expensive than Melbourne, with higher median house prices and rent prices. One of the main factors driving the difference in housing prices is the location and demand. Sydney has some of the most desirable suburbs and neighbourhoods in Australia, such as the eastern suburbs and the northern beaches, which attract high demand from buyers and renters. Melbourne also has desirable areas, such as the inner city and beachside suburbs, but the demand is generally lower than in Sydney. Another factor is the supply of housing. Sydney has experienced a shortage of housing supply in recent years, which has contributed to the rise in prices. In comparison, Melbourne has had a relatively stable supply of housing, which has helped to keep prices more affordable. The availability and affordability of housing options is a crucial factor to consider when comparing the livability of Melbourne and Sydney. Let's take a closer look at the housing markets in both cities. In terms of availability, both Melbourne and Sydney offer a range of housing options, including apartments, townhouses, and houses. However, the availability of housing can vary depending on the area you're looking in and your budget. In Sydney, for example, some of the most desirable areas can have very low housing availability, which can drive up prices. When it comes to affordability, Melbourne is generally considered more affordable than Sydney. While both cities have experienced significant growth in their housing markets in recent years, Melbourne has had a more stable supply of housing, which has helped to keep prices relatively affordable. In Melbourne, you can find one-bedroom apartments for rent for around $450 per week, while in Sydney the same type of apartment can cost around $550 per week. Similarly, the median house price in Melbourne is around $1 million, while in Sydney it's around $1.3 million. It's important to note, however, that affordability can also depend on factors such as location, size, and condition of the property. In both cities, housing prices can vary widely depending on the area you're looking in and the type of property you want. Overall, the availability and affordability of housing options in Melbourne and Sydney can be a major factor in determining which city is more livable for you. It's important to research the housing market in both cities and consider your own budget and housing needs before making a decision. Education is a crucial factor to consider when comparing the livability of Melbourne and Sydney. Both cities have a range of educational options, including primary and secondary schools, vocational education and training, and universities. One of the key differences between the education systems in Melbourne and Sydney is the concentration of universities. Sydney has some of the most highly ranked universities in Australia, including the University of Sydney and the University of New South Wales. Melbourne also has highly ranked universities, such as the University of Melbourne and Monash University, but they are spread out across the city. In terms of primary and secondary education, both cities have highly regarded public and private schools. However, the availability and quality of schools can vary depending on the area you're looking in. Sydney has some highly regarded public schools in areas such as the Northern Beaches and the North Shore, while Melbourne has highly regarded schools in areas such as Toorak and Brighton. Another factor to consider is the cost of education. In Australia, public schools are generally free, but private schools can be expensive. Sydney is generally considered more expensive than Melbourne when it comes to private school fees, with some of the most prestigious private schools charging upwards of $30,000 per year. Overall, both Melbourne and Sydney have strong education systems, but there are some key differences to consider when deciding which city is more livable for you. It's important to research the education options in both cities and consider your own needs and budget before making a decision. When it comes to job markets, Melbourne and Sydney are both thriving economic hubs in Australia. Both cities offer a range of job opportunities across a variety of industries, including finance, healthcare, technology, and education. However, there are some differences in the job markets in each city. Sydney has a larger financial services industry, with many of Australia's major banks and financial institutions located in the city. Melbourne, on the other hand, has a larger healthcare industry, with many hospitals and medical research institutions located in the city. In terms of the availability and diversity of job opportunities, both cities offer a range of options. However, the job market can vary depending on your industry and qualifications. For example, if you have a background in finance, you may find more job opportunities in Sydney. If you have a background in healthcare, you may find more opportunities in Melbourne. Another important factor to consider is the cost of living. Sydney is generally considered more expensive than Melbourne, which can impact the affordability of living in the city, including housing and transportation costs. It's important to consider the cost of living in both cities when evaluating job opportunities. Overall, both Melbourne and Sydney offer a range of job opportunities across a variety of industries. The job market can vary depending on your industry and qualifications, so it's important to research job opportunities in both cities and consider the cost of living before making a decision. Both Melbourne and Sydney are known for their rich cultural scenes, offering a range of art galleries, museums, music venues, and other cultural events. Melbourne has a reputation for being the cultural capital of Australia, with a thriving arts and music scene. The city is known for its street art, with many laneways and alleys covered in colourful murals. Melbourne also has a range of museums, including the National Gallery of Victoria and the Australian Centre for the Moving Image. Sydney also has a vibrant cultural scene, with a range of museums and galleries, including the Art Gallery of New South Wales and the Museum of Contemporary Art Australia. The city is also known for its iconic landmarks, such as the Sydney Opera House and the Harbour Bridge, which offer a range of cultural events throughout the year. Both cities offer a range of music venues, including concert halls, jazz clubs, and live music venues. Melbourne is known for its indie music scene, with many local bands and artists playing at small venues throughout the city. Sydney, on the other hand, has a larger music scene, with many international acts playing at larger venues such as the Kudos Bank Arena and the Sydney Entertainment Centre. Overall, both Melbourne and Sydney offer a range of cultural attractions and events. Whether you're interested in art, music, or other cultural experiences, both cities have something to offer. Both Melbourne and Sydney offer a range of sports and recreation facilities, with plenty of opportunities for outdoor activities. Melbourne is known for its love of sports, with a range of sporting events held throughout the year. The city has a range of sports stadiums, including the Melbourne Cricket Ground and the Rod Laver Arena, which host major events such as the Australian Open Tennis Tournament and the AFL Grand Final. Melbourne also has a range of parks and gardens, including the Royal Botanic Gardens and Yarra Bend Park, which offer opportunities for hiking, cycling, and picnicking. Sydney also offers a range of sports and recreation facilities, including beaches, parks, and hiking trails. The city is known for its beautiful beaches, including Bondi Beach and Manly Beach, which offer opportunities for swimming, surfing, and sunbathing. Sydney also has a range of parks and gardens, including the Royal Botanic Garden and the Centennial Parklands, which offer opportunities for cycling, walking, and picnicking. Both cities offer a range of outdoor activities, including hiking, cycling, and water sports. Melbourne has the advantage of being located near the Great Ocean Road, which offers opportunities for scenic drives, hiking, and camping. Sydney has the advantage of being located near the Blue Mountains, which offer opportunities for hiking and other outdoor activities. Overall, both Melbourne and Sydney offer a range of sports and recreation facilities, with plenty of opportunities for outdoor activities. Whether you're interested in sports, hiking, or simply enjoying the outdoors, both cities have something to offer. So, to summarize, we've compared Melbourne and Sydney in terms of their climate, cost of living, transportation systems, housing markets, education systems, job markets, cultural attractions, and sports and recreation facilities. Both cities have their strengths and weaknesses, but in my opinion, Melbourne edges out Sydney as the more livable city. Melbourne has a more temperate climate, a lower cost of living, a comprehensive public transportation system, a diverse housing market, high-quality education options, a growing job market, and a vibrant arts and cultural scene. That being said, Sydney's beautiful beaches and outdoor recreation opportunities are hard to beat. Of course, livability is subjective, and everyone's experience of these cities will be different. So, I encourage viewers to share their own experiences and opinions on the topic. Have you lived in either Melbourne or Sydney? What did you love or dislike about the city? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and we hope this video has been informative and helpful for those considering living in either Melbourne or Sydney.